Hey guys, and welcome back to Time Under Tension. You are back to our new series on whole being wellness. And today we're going to be talking about mind in the mind, body, spirit triad. And I'm really excited to kind of dig into this. This is something that we've both been thinking about and talking about a lot lately. And we have kind of a lot of different concepts to go over with this.
Yeah, I'm ultra excited. I can't wait. I think, the biggest lesson I've taken away from exploring this topic is just how much our mind, if not completely transforming the way that I see the power of my mind, is the fact that it literally creates our reality completely. So for me to see that manifest in my own life and then to take a step back and really see what happens when I change my mind, what that does for the overall quality of life, but also the life that I currently live and see as potential way of living just feels like freedom. So I'm obviously really excited about this.
Do you feel like there was a point in your life when you recognized that you had dominion over your mind or that you had the power to shift the way that you were operating out of your mind?
That's a good question. I would definitely say that's more recent than anything for me. I talk about my COVID transformation a lot. That was when I first allowed myself to recognize how I was feeling and to take a step back and really think about what I was thinking about. I was very reactive in my nature for a long time, that I wasn't necessarily thinking about what I was thinking about or thinking about why I was feeling what I was feeling. I was just feeling and I was just reacting verbally or in my mind according to what I thought would alleviate the pain or help the current circumstances. So I would say more recently, and then once I did Mass and Kip's trauma informed life coaching program and worked through my trauma a little bit more, that's when I was really able to pick up on what you mentioned, that pattern recognition of very similar thoughts or thought patterns that were dictating the way that I was living. So I would say probably in the last about 2 years, probably, I've been able to, I guess 3 years now, coming up on 3 years, I've been able to really step outside and respond a lot more than completely just accept every thought and feeling that I had as truth. What about you? Would you say that you had a point in time where you were able to begin to realize your dominion over your mind and thoughts?
I think it's a series of milestones, but even looking back at the ones in which I really thought, oh, I'm enlightened. This is what it means to really have awareness. I feel now that I was still so stuck in my thoughts then. And I am now as well. And I'm learning to be more aware of that and recognize when it's happening so that I can create more space between the thought and emotion and then my actual feeling that results or the belief that I decide to choose. And I think that belief, being able to choose your beliefs is something I think we lose track of as we get older in life because it's so much easier for our bodies to be habitual. Like it's expends so much less energy. We have so much more going on. We operate out of our memory. We operate out of beliefs we've practiced over and over and over again. And it's so much harder to insert a new belief. But I don't think it's harder to insert a belief than it is to live out of a belief that doesn't serve you or keeps you locked in the same patterns. And for myself, like I think a big theme of mine is feeling like a victim in a lot of situations. Like, oh, I don't feel like I'm being respected. I don't feel like people are treating me well. I don't feel like I'm getting what I deserve out of this situation. And I realized that it was really all of that goes back to me. And it's not about the other people. It's not about what they're doing or what they're like holding back from me or the way that they are seeing me. It's about how I'm perceiving myself and what I believe I deserve and what I feel like God is calling me to do in a situation. And I think it's that fine balance of having a standard for myself, but also being able to surrender that and seeing with new eyes what God has for me in a situation without tying it to a repetitive thought pattern that I've practiced throughout my life.
Yeah, and I think this is a cool opportunity to like really bring it all the way back to even what we were talking about last series and the series before that, is that trauma really impacts our patterns in the thoughts that we hold because our thoughts are all based off of, like you said, our memory or our history. And when we're thinking about something, when we're having thoughts that are projected into the future based on what we have experienced in the past, that's going to dictate the story that we end up then creating. And in my mind, it was so significant to understand that I did have the power to choose and that we always have the power to choose. Like we have agency. God really gave us the power of choice for a purpose in my mind. And so that can be in our actions 100%. But an action is to replace thought when that thought doesn't serve you or it doesn't align with who you want to be. To me, having that power of choice and also understanding that it's always a place of curiosity when you're first starting to engage with your thoughts or step outside of them and see them, because trauma really is something that can deeply influence the belief systems that we have about ourselves, about other people, about life. And so taking a lens of compassion and curiosity, and that being the lens and the framework that you're looking through at your thoughts is so crucial to me in actually seeing what it is that's causing the repetitive pattern. There's some sort of experience that happened where you're either trying to protect yourself now because of this or you don't want to experience something again. That if you can start to understand that your lens is coming from a place of the past and trauma, knowing you have that free choice in the moment to decide if that's going to be the thing that dictates your future and if it aligns with what you truly believe or want to believe about yourself, about life, and about other people, then all of a sudden the power is back in your hands again. And it's not, the power is not gifted to your numerous thoughts and thought patterns.
Yeah. And that it's like this, it's challenging having to step outside of those things because they have been protected, like you're saying. Like we start to develop these thought patterns out of trauma because it's like our bodies and our minds way of predicting danger. Like in certain situations, that's helpful. Like I remember as a kid once, the stove was on and we didn't have like a gas stove. It was electric, so you couldn't really tell it was on. And I asked my aunt, is that hot? And she was like, we'll touch it and see. And I touched it and burned my hand. And my mom was like, what are you doing? Why did you have to do that? She's like, well, she'll never touch a stove again. And it's like, okay, maybe not the best, like the best guardian advice for children. But I mean, really, like I knew from then on, it was very solidified and that was helpful. And that's really what our minds are trying to do when we experience trauma and we get hurt is like, okay, let's recognize a pattern that happened and try to prevent that from happening again. But the truth is, we we generalize patterns so much, and it could be one cue that's triggering our perception of a pattern, and it really isn't the same situation at all, or we are much different people at this point in our life. So maybe we were children when that happened, and so we can perceive that someone is not trustworthy, and our alarms can go off, and we might start to panic and not be able to maintain the kind of mindset or conversation, whatever it is, with that person because those alarms are going off. But we have to stop and recognize, like, okay, I'm safe. I'm my own person. I have autonomy now. I can set appropriate boundaries with people, like giving ourselves that truth and reminding ourselves that we are safe, but not necessarily getting stuck in that pattern that really is trying to keep us safe, but is no longer serving us because it's usually ironically keeping us locked in the same patterns because then we are just showing up as that same person.
Right. Do you think you could apply that to what? Because the reason I brought that up was really you saying that you kind of have this like place that you go in certain situations that feels like a victim, where you're having to choose, you're choosing specific thought patterns that are keeping you in a particular place. Can you kind of walk through how you've gone in and realized how you're applying history to the situation, maybe the narrative you're telling yourself, and how you then go about seeing that, working your way back with compassion and curiosity, and being able to then change the thought pattern in a new experience?
Yeah. So as as a kid, I was told that I was smart, and like I was a whatever high performer as a kid. I got to go to the special classes, whatever. So I just thought that my skill, my intelligence was all inborn and I had it. And so then it was like the standard that I had to maintain. And when I got older and I would do things, I could usually pick things up quickly, but I would still hit a point, as everyone does, where I would need to practice more to get better. I would need to fail to learn. And at that point, I would shut down and decide, I'm not good at this. I'm incapable. Like, I'm just not smart at this or not naturally inclined towards this. And
Mhm.
that was a pattern that I've repeated a lot in my life when things would start to get more challenging. Like I would always have a lot of momentum initially. I could make a lot of progress right off the bat. But when I would reach that sticking point, I would tell myself the story like, oh, you thought you were smart, you're not actually smart, or you used to be smart and you're not anymore, as if it were this like static trait, like a very fixed mindset. And then I would feel very powerless. Like, oh, well, maybe I can't do any of these things that I want to do. Maybe I can't do anything that I set my mind to. Like, I'm either good at it or I'm not. And that is a story that hasn't really served me. And I've really practiced when I get into a situation, I know initially I'll probably have a lot of momentum and I'll do pretty well and pick up on things quickly, but I will hit that sticking point where, all right, this is more my weakness. This is my weak link that I have to work on. And even though I feel that thought come up of like, oh, well, you're just not good at this. Like they're way better than you already. Why are you even trying to do this? Like this just confirms the insecurities that you've had. I think, okay, this is my area of opportunity. And that's why I tell clients, like, what obstacles slash opportunities for growth did you face this week? Because I want them to put those two things together, like the obstacles that we face, like those things we keep running into over and over. Those are our opportunities for growth. And that usually starts with changing our mind in the situation.
Right. Yeah, that's super powerful. As you were saying that, it reminded me of the RAIN acronym. Uh, the RAIN acronym was something that I learned from Tara Brach, I think her name is, her last name. She is someone that I take a ton of her Sounds True courses on meditation and being present and mindfulness and things like that. And as you're speaking that, it was really cool in the Six Habits of Growth book where he says, like, when you have an emotion, the only time it then turns into a feeling is when you're placing a story on why you feel the emotion. And so it was really cool to hear you work through that. But as you're now tying what you learned to how you're approaching your clients, what you're calling them to do is really to recognize what's happening. And so when I go to, find this RAIN acronym, it just really reminded me of that because this can be super helpful in my mind for really finding that place of separation that you mentioned, like being able to step outside and actually see what was going on, especially because as you were growing up, you had a particular label that was really driving a lot of your thought patterns. So the R for RAIN is recognize, the A is allow, the I is investigate, and the N is to nurture. And so pretty much what she talks about is when you're recognizing what thought patterns are causing emotions or how it's beginning to shape your reality, you're saying things like, oh, okay, something's here, something's here. And I kept hearing this in my meditation this morning. When emotions come up, they come up to be released. They don't come up to then create our reality or come up to keep us stuck in a thought pattern. It's like the thoughts are what we're then applying meaning to because we're humans and all we want to do is create meaning. So it was like we're constantly trying to have ourselves validated, like it's really important to feel accepted and belong and feel like you're adding value to to other people, to your work, to all these things. So when that is taking over and you're applying this meaning or the story to an emotion that is rooted in fear and doubt or shame and guilt or not good enough, very negative frequencies, then you're not allowing for that space to recognize, oh, okay, like something's here, like let me just be present with this right now. I don't need to place any meaning on it. And she says that you acknowledge the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that are affecting you. You note mentally what you can label. So instead of labeling yourself in that moment, the, you just label what it is that's happening. Like, I feel anger, or I feel fatigue, or I feel tightness in my chest. Like, you're just starting to label the physical symptoms of it, not necessarily trying to label yourself in it. The A is allow. Like, it's okay, this belongs. Allow the thoughts, emotions, or feelings you have. Recognize to just be there. Don't try to fix it or avoid it. This allowing creates a pause that brings separation from you and the emotion. The investigate part is you say things like, what's happening in my environment? Why might I be feeling this way? How am I experiencing this in my body? What am I believing? Like you mentioned, that belief is huge. And it's like, what do I need? And has this happened before? So instead of getting so focused on creating more of whatever it is that is manifesting from your negative thought, you're actually able to turn that back inward into yourself and start to uncover a little bit of the root and the source and that experience or that label that you put on yourself. And it's like, get curious about the feelings, thoughts, behaviors, direct focused attention to your present experience and get in your body. Then the nurturing piece is like, I'm here with you, I love you, I'm listening, trust in your goodness. So it's bringing in that compassion piece of when you're nurturing the thoughts or the emotions that are coming up, you're not coming at it with a condemning voice or a voice that you should be better, should have done this or should have done that. It's very like, I'm here, I love you, I'm listening. Intentionally nurture your inner life with self-compassion and kindness. Sense what the hurting place inside you needs most and then offer an action of care. It doesn't need a message of love or forgiveness or reassurance. It's like, instead of allowing this story that you're telling to then manifest into your relationships and who you actually start to become, you're actually able to transform all of that and create an entirely new story based on the information that you just gained in the present moment.
That's awesome. And I love that idea of allowing and and releasing the emotion, like really letting it make its way through your system with grace and acceptance. Because I feel like in my life, I've really struggled with pushing them down, like feeling like emotions are inappropriate and invalidating them and believing like I want to be stoic. And I think that there's value in being able to step outside of your emotions and not identify with them. So in that sense, I think something like stoicism has some value. And I think more people could learn how to create that space between stimulus and response. But truly, we have to process through an emotion or it will manifest in our bodies. Like it does go somewhere. And I think that's really important to understand. It has to be something that goes through us and then comes out of us. It just, we can help it come out in a more appropriate and constructive way instead of allowing it to drive our responses so that we're just living this like reactionary life.
Yeah. That quote is like, what you believe you become. Whatever you're believing about yourself, whatever you believe about a circumstance or how an outcome will show up or what's going to happen, that usually is what ends up happening. I've had multiple athletes say to me lately, like, I just have this really bad feeling before a match sometimes, and I just know I'm not going to pass well, or I just know I'm not going to play well, and then I just don't. I'm just always right. And I'm like, yes, you're always right. Because literally where focus goes, energy flows. If you're believing something, that is what's going to be. And we listened to this video yesterday that talked about how the universe is very supportive of whatever your self-talk is. The universe, or what we call, energies around us, are manifesting, really starting to truly believe that you can create your reality by the stories that you do choose to create in your mind, or the beliefs that you decide to be true in your mind. Those things are going to navigate all of your decisions, which then lead to little decisions all lined up create where you're going to be. And so for me, it was just this, like, this aha moment in my head of anytime you're placing some sort of ceiling, that's your ceiling, or you're creating some sort of outcome in your mind, you're continually going to drive yourself towards that outcome.
This is something that I've noticed a lot in my own life. And before living out of that victimhood state, feeling like good things should just happen to me. And then when they don't, it just seems to confirm what I believe about myself. But that is a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. And now I see like having a lot more intentionality around, all right, what do I want from this day? What am I going to bring to this day? What am I going to focus on today? What skill am I going to foster today? What's my priority today? How do I want to show up in my relationship today? That is so vital. I think there is this amazing process, like you're talking about, where when you're in it and you feel an emotion, you have that, you can start to create that space where you're stopping and reflecting and allowing and moving through that process and nurturing. But I also think that there's a step before where it's like start being proactive at the beginning of your day where you're thinking, how do I want this day to be? Because if you're not being proactive, you're going to be reactive. Those are pretty much the only two options. So you can either help steer the ship or you can just kind of be tossed around by the waves. And I think you said yesterday, you can live like that, and that's fine. And God has so much grace that He will guide us into our path. The waves will take us where they need to. Even if we crash along the shore along the way, like we probably will crash a lot more often because we have to learn the lessons from those repeating patterns until we can start to believe differently or act differently. And for most people, I feel like it takes that. It takes having some horrible diagnosis, it takes losing a family member, it takes a midlife crisis, it takes a national pandemic and a worldwide pandemic. It takes some drastic event for us to be like, whoa, I need to shift the way that I'm living. But really, if you want to get ahead of that and not wait for a midlife crisis to do something, start today with just like being intentional about how you go into your day, setting a tone, saying, who is the person I want to show up as today? And what do I want to work on? Like, set a goal, a mission for the day. And that will get you in that space where at the beginning of the day, you're not immediately identifying with your mind. You're stepping outside of it, kind of as your own coach, saying, okay, this is how we're going to approach the day. And then it's a lot easier to maintain that dynamic through the day where you're like, oh, okay, curious, this is happening. I wonder what's going on. And then you can check back in on, was that in alignment with how I wanted to show up today? No. Now I can kind of move through that rain process with this emotion, but start the day in that kind of mindset and just take it one day at a time from there. It doesn't have to be like, I'm uprooting my entire life right now. It's just like today, how can you go into it being more intentional about how your thoughts are going to shape your experience of the day, not the outcome of the day, but your experience of the day.
Would you say that you gained a lot more awareness of your thoughts once you did have that personal philosophy outlined?
Personal philosophy.
I guess that's what I call it, but you're talking about you've been talking about your, who you want to be, and you have words, and you have two sentences, like you're very, this is who I want to show up as, and you, like, I call it a personal philosophy, but you can call it whatever you want. What do you call it?
Yeah, I think I love that phrase, personal philosophy. And then like my list of values. Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah, so
yeah, that gave me so much clarity. And there are things that I write down these words like every single day. Maybe not all of them, but like the ones that I'm really focused on right now. For instance, like intentionality is one of my biggest words. Just being intentional in everything I do. Integrity is my like primary word. If I could have one word that defined my life, it would be that I lived a life of integrity. So having those words in front of me on my computer screen, on the fridge, like rewriting them every day, it helps me remember the kind of person I want to be so that when I'm in a situation, I'm checking in and going, okay, am I living out of this? Am I being intentional? Am I operating out of integrity? Am I being compassionate? Like kind of my like driving words. It gives me a lot of clarity.
yeah, because that's interesting. I redid mine yesterday, and to me it ties into this. I think the biggest question I had to start asking myself in regards to my thoughts or how I was beginning to feel about something, knowing that my body was responding to every thought that I was having. And I think we can, this is where we can go next episode, is kind of talking about how the body is impacted by our thoughts on a physiological um, component or aspect. But our bodies have a voice and our minds have a voice, and they do have to be in relationship with one another, and our bodies are constantly trying to talk to us. But if we're consistently living out of the mind and not asking ourselves very deeply, like, what do I really believe, though? Like, what do I believe? And does that belief serve your joy? Does it serve your growth, your expansion? Like, really asking yourself that one question: is this belief based on facts, or is this belief based on my assumptions? Like, where is this belief coming from? Is this my voice? Is this my dad's voice? Whose voice is it? As you're kind of working through seeing your thoughts for what they are, having those very clearly defined values, and having that personal philosophy of how you want to live your life, I hadn't gotten there until yesterday of how significant that is in the decisions that I'm making in every single moment. Like we are constantly making decisions. And if our decisions are driven, like you said, by whatever thought decides to enter our minds at the time, that's releasing a lot of our ability to actually take control of our life and take control, have autonomy, be able to participate as a co-creator with God. So I just think that that's really cool. And I think you taught me that. I think that could be something to, as people are really starting to step outside and see their thoughts and ask what it is that they're believing, for that to be, the feeling that's coming up, or, the disruption that's happening. Then replacing that, well, okay, well, who do I want to believe? Like, who do I want to be, and what does that person believe? And that is just such a powerful exercise, I think. And I think you do that a lot with your clients, as you're asking them very challenging questions that call upon this idea of living in integrity and in alignment. And to me, what that's really doing is creating this personal harmony. And that was another like phrase that I heard yesterday that really resonates with me, is like, when we experience personal harmony, it's because our thoughts are shaping our present and future and past in alignment with our God-given spirit that's, driving us towards this habit of purpose consistently.
And in these situations, I think we often think about big things, but once you get this practice down, I think you can kind of apply it to smaller situations too. Like you get in this habit of asking more consistently, the person that I want to be, what would they believe in this situation? And then you can start to break down like smaller events in your life and start to even see how many thoughts you have that aren't yours, that you're not consciously choosing, but now you have the opportunity to do so. And I think doing this process recently has been helpful now that I am more aligned with my values and reminding myself of them more frequently. And my struggle has been at points not to be judgmental of the thoughts that I'm seeing and recognize that, again, they're serving me. They're things that I adopted when I was really young, but I have the power and autonomy, and I would say even the responsibility to start to replace them. Because if we want to live lives of greatness, whatever that means for us individually, it's a lot of responsibility. But out of that responsibility, we can impact people on such a high level. And that's really, to me, the value of life, is like, how can I serve the people around me? Like, what can I do with what I know? It's not useful to just know it. It has to be for something more. So for me, reminding myself of that purpose of like me doing this self work has this like runoff effect of affecting everyone else in my life. But for my benefit, it totally shifts my experience. And it just takes a lot of practice. And you can start with things as small as when you feel disrupted. I think that was a great word. When you feel disrupted, when you feel dysregulated, when you feel upset, when you find yourself irritated in a situation, physically pull away from the situation until you get a little bit better about doing this in real time, and create that space and just ask yourself, okay, like what thought, yeah, allow the emotion, but like, okay, I'm angry. What's behind that anger? Because usually it's not just like, well, that person said this thing and that pissed me off and it's their fault. And we could stop there and totally give our power away in every single situation. And then we could go tell our friend, like, oh yeah, this person pissed me off, blah, 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 and have them like feed back into that feeling and get nowhere ever. And we just feel it until we feel a little bit better and then we can move on and we build resentment. Or we can say, all right, I just got really angry at this person. Why? What's actually going on? And you might find, oh, I've been feeling frustrated in this relationship for a while, or I feel like maybe this person doesn't respect me. Well, maybe that's because I haven't set boundaries with them as to how I want them to treat me, or I haven't spoken up when they've, violated my boundaries. And you get to the real why and where you have power in the situation. And I think that's like where the value really lies in this is like, this gives you back your power to reshape your experience. You don't have to just ride life as like, yeah, it's just one struggle after the next. It is going to be struggle after struggle, but you can either see that as you're just laying there taking it, getting beat up, or you're learning to ride the waves and getting a little bit more skilled as you do so and learning to find more joy amidst the challenges.
Hmm. Hmm. The video that, we can even put it in the comments too if we want to share with them, speaks to the fact that we have our side of the street and everybody else has their side of the street. And we have to clean up our side of the street before we even go to someone else about how we're feeling or what they did wrong or whatever the case may be. Like, we have to focus on our side of the street first. We have to make sure our side of the street is clean before we go and talk to the other person that's on their side of the street, because that is taking personal responsibility, which is what you're talking about, which is the hard thing to do. If we go back to what you were saying in the beginning, I'm not this and I'm not that, and like all those thoughts. And all of us have that in some area where it's just safer to start complaining about something, or it's safer to choose the like victim mentality in a situation rather than to take responsibility for the fact that we are always going to have a choice in the matter, whether that's to allow something to push us down, like you're saying, or to change our lens and start seeing how we can grow from this experience. Or, yeah, we failed. Okay, that's a great learning opportunity. Now, what's my next step forward? It's like having the ability to clean your side of the street first, which means to take full responsibility for your experience and the way that you're shaping the world, is so much harder to do than to revert into your shell and, poor me and like all that, which is, again, I'm not saying that I don't do that sometimes. Like, we're all human and we're all going to get to the point where we're so exhausted that we just have to like let it out and complain a little bit, and like whatever happens for you personally, if complaining is like a bigger deal for you, then that'll resonate. But even if it's like, man, just everything always just goes wrong, I just knew this was going to happen, like that kind of a mentality is so much safer than taking responsibility for the fact that you now have a choice to change it. And I think that really aligns you with the truth, and then that truth is what then sets you free to be able to create and um, create lasting change, create a new future, and actually have the peace that everyone is seeking. I think there's so much anxiety and there's so much depression and there's so much stress and all of these very, you know, what seem to be super immobilizing, that freedom from those things is really what most people are craving. They want freedom, they want inner peace, they want to find joy, they want to feel fulfilled, have energy. And those emotions, those higher frequencies, are all because you have a choice that you're actively choosing to utilize. You are understanding that you are your own healer and you have the ability to take responsibility and create change. It's super challenging, like you're saying, but those habits that you're implementing are going to be, the little habits one at a time are going to be the way to really start to identify what needs your energy most and where you can start to change. And that becomes a normal, regular pattern for you. Okay, next, instead of trying to do it all at one time. But again, the whole point of this is that it all starts in your mind. It's completely created in the mind.
Definitely. And I think this will just be a fun challenge to practice this week. As you move through your week, practice that. Like think about when you hit a situation where you're feeling unsettled, if you're feeling an emotion that maybe isn't an emotion you want to live out of, step back and get really curious about it and see what thought or belief is driving that, and then see what thought or belief you can insert in there. But also take time at the beginning of your day to be proactive about what you want to believe. Like just as one more like little bit, one thing that I tell myself at the beginning of the day is that like I chose everything that's going to happen today. Like almost like before my life, like I chose everything that's going to happen today. So I want to see what's in it. Like, or God chose this for me. Like, what's in this? And so even the tough situations throughout the day, I'm already primed to start thinking, all right, what am I learning in this? What is this about? What is this challenge? Something is in this for me that I need. And that's why I'm going through this experience. And for me, that's helped me totally shift away from feeling like anxious about certain situations, but safe in others. It's like everything is neutral because I'm safe in me. And I just have to learn to navigate these different scenarios and think, okay, what am I learning in this? What do I need from this scenario that will help me show up better as I move forward in my life? So think about some maybe like 2 or 3 core beliefs you could start practicing this week that can help drive your day. And then as you get into those challenging situations throughout the day, go back to your beliefs and think, okay, if I were to think out of these, how would I then perceive this situation? And what would be the thought?
Mm-hmm.
How would that thought then shape my experience as opposed to how maybe the pattern thought, the default thought was shaping my experience?
Yeah, so good. I think the tie to our feelings and our body being a representation of our thoughts is a perfect segue for next week, talking about how our thoughts are actually impacting our, physiology in our bodies.
Definitely. So in the show notes, we will link, I'll link something to Tara Brock's RAIN uh, acro acronym. I always
Mm-hmm.
forget what that is. That the word? Acronym below, and then also a link to that video, which you guys can watch. Would highly recommend watching this video, and it will really provide some context for what we're going to talk about next week as we move through the mind, body, spirit triad into more of the body and how everything is impacted by the body. And it is like a back and forth relationship between those 3 factors. Awesome. All right. Thank you guys for listening. Please remember to like, subscribe, share the show if you like it. Make sure you're following the channel so you can stay tuned for new episodes. And thank you guys. Have an awesome week and really focus on the thoughts that are driving your life.